is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and Amy will be back tomorrow. So we poured over a lot of the Tucker Carlson-Putin interview on Friday. Of course, it was released Thursday night. One topic we didn't get to that much on Friday that I do want to get to with our next guest is the exchange that Tucker Carlson and Putin had on the matter of the Nord Stream pipeline and who is the saboteur. We don't have any official rulings. Sweden, Germany, Denmark have investigations ongoing, but it's sort of like cocaine in the White House. Anything that's sensitive, sadly, the origins of COVID, anything that's sensitive, you can count on sort of the establishment, whether domestically or globally, to essentially run out the clock. An exhaustive investigation that everybody has forgotten about, can't even remember exactly the circumstances under which the event occurred, and we, after a thorough effort, we can't come to any sort of conclusion about who the responsible party is. The Dobbs opinion leak at the Supreme Court, same sort of thing. I think the same people are in charge of all of these investigations. All right, so take a listen to the exchange on Nord Stream.
Who blew up Nord Stream?
You for sure.
I was busy that day. Nate, do you have? I did not blow up Nord Stream. Thank you, though.
У вас лично, может быть, есть алиби. У вас лично.
You personally may have an alibi, but the CIA has no such alibi.
Do you have evidence that NATO or the CIA did it?
You know, I won't get into details, but people always say in such cases, look for someone who is interested.
But I'm confused. I mean, that's the biggest act of industrial terrorism ever, and it's the largest emission of CO2 in history. Okay, so if you had evidence, and presumably given your security services, your intel services, you would, that NATO, the US, CIA, the West, did this, why wouldn't you present it and win a propaganda victory?
In the war of propaganda, it is very difficult to defeat the United States, because the United States controls all the world's media and many European media. The ultimate beneficiary of the biggest European media are American financial institutions. Don't you know that? So it is possible to get involved in this work, but it is cost prohibitive, so to speak. We can simply shine the spotlight on our sources of information, and we will not achieve results.
So I can't produce the evidence that would substantiate my claim because nobody will believe me. That's not particularly persuasive. But the topic is an important one. So let's start there with Stephen Bucci, who's served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, visiting fellow of the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. Thank you for having me back on the show.
What about Nord Stream? You know, these are pipelines that allowed Russia to provide 45% of the natural gas that Europe consumes, so it's a big deal. There was a competing pipeline that was coming online just days before Nord Stream was sabotaged, and it has been concluded that there was sabotage. Nobody's offered a conclusion as to who the saboteurs were. So what should we glean from that exchange? Generally speaking.
Well, because if you listen to the way Tucker formed the question, he did it fairly well. Look, this would be a massive victory for you if you had proof that it was the United States or another Western country who did it, trying to smear Russia. Why, if you have the info, don't you put it out there? And this is a man, he's asking, who has had no problem saying some of the most ridiculous things in the world like, well, this war's all Ukraine's fault. Okay, but you guys invaded them, so it does not leave Putin with a lot of credibility on this subject. I haven't listened to the whole interview, so I can't opine on every bit of it. But in this particular exchange, Putin does not come across convincing. You guys control it all, so we really can't get the word out there. Oh, that's a bunch of baloney.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But then, so what's the larger context of Nord Stream, though? Why haven't we been able to find out who is the responsible party? It would seem to be an important piece of information to identify.
I don't know the answer to that. Is it perhaps we're leaving the investigation to these other agencies because we don't think anybody will believe us if we say, well, look, it was Russia. I think all of the intel that I have seen points towards Russia doing it, or Russia trying to do it and blame it on Ukraine or a Western country. Ukraine really didn't have the capability to do what happened, so I don't think we can blame them. To be honest with you, there's only a couple of countries who could have pulled this off. The United States, one or two other NATO allies, like perhaps Britain or France, and Russia or China. That's about it. And I'm not sure who did it yet. And I think we at least have to wait for those European investigations, a couple of which have some credibility, and see what they say. It may not be convincing evidence at that point, but I don't think it's worth trying to guess now.
Speaking of Britain, one of the other things that Putin said vis-a-vis Ukraine was that effectively there was a peace settlement on the table that Zelensky had at least voiced support for, and then Boris Johnson, who was British Prime Minister at the time, flew in and scuttled the deal. Is there any truth to that?
That one I don't know the answer to. Frankly, that doesn't sound convincing either.
It doesn't.
Given how hardcore Zelensky has been since the beginning of this. I mean, I could see some of the European allies getting wobbly and saying, well, we really need to probably give away half of your country just to get peace. They've done that before. They could do it again. I don't see Zelensky being the wobbly one in this case. I think that's not credible. Something
else. I mean, this was a thread throughout the 2-hour interview, which is Putin is essentially, this is how he casts himself. I'm a man of peace. I have spent the last 2 decades plus reaching out to the West after the fall of the Soviet Union, and he's got a very stylized version of how that went down too, by the way. But which I won't get into now. But I even asked Bill Clinton when he was on his way out the door in the end of the last century if there was any possibility Russia could be part of NATO. He seemed open-minded to it, but then he talked to staff. He came back to me, said that's not going to happen. I said fine, but just don't expand eastward. And then at every turn, I had commitments that we were not going to expand, that the NATO would not expand eastward towards Russia, and they were broken and multiple times. And I've extended this olive branch and that olive branch. I've tried to do this. I've tried to do that. He said the same thing when the question was asked, will you allow us to take even Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter, home? It's like, well, I've already done so much. So at some point he can return to his motherland probably, but I've done so much and I've got nothing in return. I've been just betrayed by the West at every turn. And I just wonder how that's sort of a top line summary of his characterization of the last 20 years of his reign. And I just wanted to get your reaction to that.
Well, I can't give you eyewitness accounts of that entire period. I can give you eyewitness accounts of some of it, though. And I have to tell you, when we were doing our missile defense setup, because we were very concerned about Iran and North Korea, this is during the George W. Bush administration when I was in the Pentagon, we brought the Russians in. we brought in very high-ranking Russians and said, this is what we're doing. We opened up top secret documents and showed them. It was stuff they probably already knew, so it wasn't that big a deal. But we were as transparent as I think we have ever been with the Russians. And the Russians said, not no, but heck no. We know you're really doing this against us. We don't trust you guys. So for him to portray himself and his subordinates as, oh, we were always reaching out the olive branches. It was you guys who were the problem, including on the whole transfer when they were trying to rebuild their country after the fall of the Soviet Union. The things we did to try and help them were way over the top. They were the first ones we went to in that period, not to the other former Soviet socialist republics. We went to Russia first because they were the big elephant that was still in that position. And Russia stiff-armed us at every point in the process. I get they're suspicious of, the expansion of NATO, but I'm sorry, he's trying to operate under the old sphere of influence kind of theory that those countries used to be part of the Soviet Union or under their sway through the Warsaw Pact, and they should stay under their sway now. And if anything that violates that is a threat to Mother Russia, I'm sorry, that is a delusional view of his position in the world and the way the world should run. The big countries don't get to poop all over the little countries and say, we don't care what you want to do, we don't care where you want to face, you're going to be under our control and it's going to stay that way in perpetuity. Sorry, Vlad, that's not going to happen.
He was asked by Tucker about his designs past Ukraine on Poland and the Baltics. Listen to what he said.
Because we have no interest in Poland, Latvia, or anywhere else. Why would we do that? We simply don't have any interest. It's just threat-mongering.
Well, the argument, I know you know this, is that, well, he invaded Ukraine, he has territorial aims across the continent, and you're saying unequivocally you don't.
Это абсолютно исключено.
It is absolutely out of the question. You just don't have to be any kind of analyst. It goes against common sense to get involved in some kind of a global war.
Глобальная война.
So, Stephen, what's your assessment of his designs beyond Ukraine?
I think he's ignoring the key point to that argument. If that's the case, then why the heck did you invade Ukraine? I mean, Ukraine, one, doesn't have the capability to go after Russia. Ukraine had essentially, prior to the invasion, kind of given up on getting Crimea back. They still wanted some peace on their eastern part of the country, but that's because those areas that Russia had helped secede, and there's no doubt that Russia helped them do that with military forces who came in with no insignia on them, they were still agitating and attacking Ukrainians. It's kind of bizarre to me that Putin thinks nobody was watching this whole time. If he's willing to invade Ukraine, then why should we believe him when he says, oh, but I don't want to invade anybody else? It's just not credible, and he really is betting on the looniest people in America to believe him and think he's a credible partner in the future, and he has proven himself not to be. At a brief period when, frankly, they were really down on their luck, and they watched the first Gulf War and went, whoa, those guys are a little better at this stuff than we thought they were. I'm glad we didn't have to fight them, and they got very cooperative. And then since then, Putin has just done mischief. And I'm sorry, I know a lot of people want to believe him because they think we shouldn't be in Ukraine. But I got to tell you, this man is a professional liar. He is a trained intelligence operative, and he's really good at looking you straight in the eye and telling you something that is 100% off the truth, and would probably pass a polygraph while doing it.
No, I mean, it's not about him being a partner, though, and I don't believe him either. I don't take anything he says at face value either. But it's a question of making the assessment, right, of whether or not, if from his perspective, the way he thinks, it would be in his interest to follow on up on Ukraine into the Baltics or Poland or elsewhere. That's the question. It's not like any naive view that he is a partner for a better tomorrow.
I think he 100%, if he got away with taking over Ukraine, if his original plan had worked and he had taken Kyiv and he had blown the Zelensky government out and was able to impose or place someone there that was a puppet to him, that he wouldn't have immediately turned around and started fiddling with the Baltic countries or Poland. But down the road, he would have taken that as, hey, we did it in Ukraine. Let's see how far we can get in the next one. There's no doubt in my mind that he would have continued to push that he would consider it in his interest to do it. Maybe not a straight-up invasion, but definitely doing that, the little green men, as we started to call them, sending in the operatives, messing with the locals, trying to provoke something that would then give them justification to act in defense of people they said were, their people that they had to protect.
One other thing before we let you go. Venezuela saber-rattling in our direction. Amazing that is. If the U.S. imposes any sanctions on the Venezuelan oil and gas industries, why? We've been begging them for oil and gas because of our own idiotic energy policy. But let's say that the U.S. says Venezuela is threatening that they will end all repatriation flights of Venezuelan migrants from the United States. And this is a larger issue. These countries that say, we send a bunch of people to break into your country, we're not taking them back. What should the U.S. posture be?
The Biden administration has painted themselves into a corner with this one. I don't know what the heck you do with them. You can't just put them on a plane and force the plane to land. If the other guys, won't let you land, you're kind of stuck. So what do you do with those folks? I don't have a good answer for that. The answer was you shouldn't have let them in the first place.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know what you do if the other country will not cooperate and take the people back. We had that problem with a lot of the folks that we had at Guantanamo Bay. At a certain point, during the global war on terror, at a certain point, we were done with those people. We knew there was no more use holding them. We didn't think they were an enormous threat anymore, and we were ready to repatriate them. But either they didn't want to go back or the country didn't want to take them back, and we were like, what the heck do we do with these guys? And there was about 100+ people that, as you recall, when Obama took office, his campaign promise was close it all down, get rid of them all. And he found out he couldn't get rid of all of them.
We got to go. Stephen Bucci, Heritage Foundation. Thanks as always, Steve. Appreciate your time. And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up at 7:07, Andy McCarthy. It is now 7 o'clock, AM 560 WIND.
Israel gets 2 hostages back. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News, rescuing them in a raid in Gaza.
We understand that the Israelis overnight taking part in this mission in the densely populated city of Rafah just before 2 a.m. local time. On the